Yes, that's a
uh,
lot of peas.
let's pray it doesn't paint us as a pair of problematic pariahs. All right. So, Kriya, would you like to go ahead and introduce us?
And with that, allow me to welcome you to episode 6 of a podcast where today we will be eschewing the rules of polite company and talking about, you guessed it, politics and games. But before we go down that rabbit hole, Adam, would you like to fill us in on what you've been playing this week?
All right. Well, I'm going to cheat again. I have not had a lot of time to play this week. As you might have noticed, I have some things here on my face. Had to go for a biopsy. Also, my wife is on vacation this week, which means she's at home and occupying the TV. So I'm going to kind of go back a little bit into the past, and not too recently, but earlier this year, I was playing Final Fantasy VII Remake. So I'm going to be reviewing that. So as you know, obviously the game is going to be Final Fantasy VII Remake. All right, this is created by Square Enix, and this is a reimagining, but also a updated graphically version of the original 1997 game, Final Fantasy VII. So this was released on March 20. It was supposed to come out a little bit earlier than that, but then
these sewer rats appear to call themselves Avalanche, sir.
So the original Final Fantasy.
You can have it for saving my life.
It's only going to be taking place in the first portion of the original
You think he's a keeper?
This is
Y'all gotta look at the bigger picture here. Nothing worth fighting for was ever won without sacrifice.
Help me!
Obviously, this being in parts, it's not one complete Final Fantasy VII like the original. They're doing this in parts, so they do have to kind of introduce certain characters a little bit earlier to kind of give you that hook, because otherwise you might have this character popping in section 3, which, you know, new players might be like, who's this guy, why do I care? Whereas people from the original game would have known that because that was their natural introduction. But gameplay wise, they've changed quite a bit. So the old school Final Fantasies were what they called ATB, or active time battle. And what that basically meant was it was a variation of turn based, where traditional turn based is I take a turn, you take a turn, I take a turn, you take a turn, similar to tabletop games like D&D and that sort of thing. Well, what active time battle does is you basically just have a little bar that'll charge up, and that's based on your character's speed stat. And when that bar is full, then your character can take an action. So faster characters are acting more often, slower characters are acting less often, and of course you can augment that with spells like haste or slow. Now the game has gone more into an action kind of game. So everything's in real time, you attack in real time and all that. But obviously fans of the original game were very, very adamant that they really wanted active time battle, especially the old school fans. Okay. Now they wanted to bring it into the modern era, but they also wanted to kind of appease those old fans. So what they've done is they've created kind of this hybrid action active time battle system. And what happens is basically your character can auto attack at any time, as just like you would in, say, Legend of Zelda or Devil May Cry. So you're always doing your auto attacks, and what those will do is charge up your active time battle bar. It'll naturally charge slowly, but every time you attack an enemy, it'll give it kind of a little boost. And then when that's full, then you can use all your extra abilities. So that's when you can use an item, you can cast a spell, or now characters have a lot of unique abilities to them that really separate the way they play. So you can activate those abilities as well. There are some plot changes. Like I said, they do add in some characters a little bit earlier than you might normally see them. I wasn't a huge fan of that, being a huge Final Fantasy VII fan. I would have preferred that they had stuck with the original story, but then at the same time, I get it. You know, they want to bring in that new market, not just appeal to the nostalgia. But what I do like is that they do expand some of the minor characters quite a bit. In the original game, you have 3 characters that help you out: Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, and they're just kind of there for a while, and then, you know, they're gone. But here they kind of expand them out, so we get a little bit of background on them. We know what their hobbies are. We meet one of their families. Um, so they do kind of expand a lot of these minor characters quite a bit. Moving forward, it's kind of up in the air. The way they ended it was they pretty much followed the Midgar plot, but then they've kind of left it open as to one of the key themes of this is destiny versus choice. And destiny representing the original arc of the original game. Do we follow destiny? Do we follow the way things are intended to go? Do we follow the original beat of the game versus choice? Are we able to do things differently? And so it'd be interesting to see how they go with that. Are these characters really going to follow their destiny and the original canon storyline, or are they going to follow their choices and kind of branch out and do something different from what they originally did? So it will be interesting to see where they go with that moving forward. If I were to recommend this to somebody, I would recommend it to somebody who's a fan of the action RPG kind of genre. It's not going to be as intensive as, say, something like Nier Automata or Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, but it does add a unique flavor with this active time battle RPG kind of element. I would also highly recommend it for nostalgic Final Fantasy VII fans, although do be cautious and temper your expectations because they do change a few things that might make some people kind of irritated. And then also, like I said, going forward, it looks like they might not necessarily do all the same things. So it is something to kind of watch out for if you're one of those hardcore, like canon kind of people. I would also recommend this for younger people. Obviously, Final Fantasy VII is a huge influential game. It's kind of I would say Final Fantasy VII is to RPGs what Halo is to first-person shooters, in that RPGs were kind of niche, and then with Final Fantasy VII, they kind of ballooned out and became this huge thing, and kind of became the kind of a main market kind of genre. In the same sense that first-person shooters were kind of a PC niche thing, and then when Halo came out, suddenly, wait, we can have shooters on consoles? I mean, we had them with like GoldenEye, but Halo was really the one that brought that out. So for younger people who've heard of this game but never really played it, and it has not aged well graphically. So I know a lot of younger people are looking at it and they're like, oh my God, how did you ever survive this? What is that square? Then I would definitely recommend that they use this as kind of an entry level thing. So yeah. So I'm going to open the floor for questions because I know Crian usually has some.
I always do. Thinking about this, because when Final Fantasy VII, the original, came out, I watched my roommate play it back when I was living in Massachusetts. Comparing the remake to the original, in the Adam Gray scale, 10 being great, 0 being terrible, what would you give the remake compared to the original?
See, it's so hard to gauge that because, in a way, I almost feel like they're not even really that comparable. The Final Fantasy VII was definitely a product of its time, and that's why if you look back graphically, I mean, the characters have these weird Popeye arms, and this is graphically beautiful. Back then, it was not graphically beautiful. It was even by back then standards, it was kind of goofy looking, and it has not aged as well as some of even like Final Fantasy VI, which is sprite based and 2D, has aged better than Final Fantasy VII, which was fully 3D. As far as gameplay, I at first wasn't really into the action RPG thing because it was very different than what I wanted, but it did kind of grow on me. But as far as comparing them, I would say look at this as kind of an example of the Terminator movies where they all kind of are part of the same universe, but each one doesn't necessarily have to associate with the other one because of weird time loops and things like that. So I would say kind of look at it that way. They're both part of the Final Fantasy VII compilation, but I would look at them as two distinct, different games. I wouldn't really compare them. I would compare their parallels, but yeah. But as far as fun, I would say it was definitely worth playing for me.
Okay, okay. I mean, that's what I wanted to know. I really
Yeah, yeah,
would
yeah.
like to get into Final Fantasy. I was telling Adam before I really want to play the Crystal Chronicles because it's out on Switch, but I just gotta wait for it to be on sale.
Yeah. On a side note, I realized that I did this here. I didn't have my background up. All right, so if you can see my background now, where is it? Let me lean this way. You can see here. This is my. I bought the first class edition, the collector's edition. Final Fantasy VII is extremely important to me, so I have right here my collector's edition cloud model. So
That's cool.
so yeah, so I mean, I definitely am not the person to ask because I have a very clear bias. So
Sometimes that's the best person to ask, the people who are biased towards it can give you the most information.
well, they give you the best sell anyway.
True, true, true.
So what about you? What have you been playing?
Well, I have continued my trend of bouncing around games. And let me switch back to me. And I streamed this on Monday. It is called Shadowrun Dragonfall. Where is the game? Here, in our little viewing box, you'll see me. This is my stream for Monday. The quality is not great because it was streamed on Facebook. Facebook only allows you to download the standard definition of your actual video. So bear with me. But Shadowrun Dragonfall, the director's cut, it was released by a company called Harebrained Schemes. You would know them from Shadowrun Hong Kong.
Hello, everybody. This is Crian from Middle Age
a long
Gaming.
time ago, 6
Today
years
I am
ago,
playing
February
Shadowrun
27,
Dragonfall, the director's cut.
That being said, I am
As
playing
I said in the
game
title,
game.
I
It
played
does
this
look
before, and I
really,
played
really
it when
good
it first
as far
came
as
out.
the scenes
But
and the
I
atmosphere.
only played it for
But the models
18
themselves,
minutes or so,
like,
according
I
to
looked
my
up
Steam.
at my character closely
And
in the stream, and he looks
So,
like
yep,
very
that's
square,
just the way it is.
so
About
the
today, we're
game,
going to give it
it
a go. I was
looks
trying to think of
great.
what I wanted
I
to
love the way
play.
it looks a lot.
And
There's lots
I
of
decided,
dialogue.
well,
I was
I'll just
telling
give
Adam
this a
at
go
work
because I wanted
yesterday
something like
that. I started reading the dialogue during the
relatively
stream, and I just couldn't do it
easygoing.
because there's just so much of text. But in Monday,
And-
really fit
and
my
just
mood.
bear with
I
me,
was
I'm
looking for
trying to
something, not as stressful
open
as
my
an FPS
Facebook
in terms of
dashboard so I
shooting
can
and
keep an
moving
eye on
around and
chat
not too much thinking
while
involved.
you guys are
There are dialogue
playing.
choices in this game, so dialogue really influences
The
the way you deal with other characters, the outcomes of
and
relationships and events.
I can go into full screen.
Combat was quite difficult. I played the tutorial mission
Where's
on
my
Monday.
stream?
I will put notes in our stream
Show
notes
live
today,
video
so you can go watch that stream
preview.
if you
There
want.
we are.
I
Hopefully
did
you
the
guys can hear
tutorial
me
mission and some
loud
other
and
stuff like
clear,
fetch
and
quests
everything is
on
loud.
Monday. If you don't know what Shadowrun is, Shadowrun
Alright,
is
so
a
I have
tabletop RPG
really
system
forgotten how to
that
play
was
this.
created
And
in
I'm like,
similar to Warhammer 40k.
Alright, so
It's
let's
a
go
world
here.
in which
Let me know if
elves
this
and
is too
trolls
small.
and that kind of stuff,
Confirm.
they come back to life. And,
because I'm playing
I was
this
just saying,
at
come back to life is the
4K,
wrong
I
word.
could go down
They
to
come
1080.
back into society again, and the world freaks out. And Shadowrun is set
Anyway,
so
so
it
it says so far so good.
2050s
If your
or
skirmish with
2040s
security
where
set up any
technology
alarms,
and
you don't
magic
hear them.
sort of coexist.
Monica leads the rest of the team
And,
down
there used
into
to
the
be
basement
dragons
of
in
Harperman. You
2021.
pay
Next
this
year,
way,
who
the
knows,
data
we might
vault
be lucky.
lies ahead.
So that's
Okay,
pretty much
this looks a bit
Shadowrun.
better.
I definitely say it's someone
That's a
who's
big
looking for
freaking
something
fog,
low
leap
stress,
10.
as
Bigger than
it doesn't
on
really
the
require a
schematic.
lot out of you.
Schematic didn't
You
have
do
a
need to
date. A client
think
may
about
have
your
old
decisions.
intel. Still,
But
our
it's
instructions
not a
were clear.
game
The
where you
data
feel
we're
like I have
looking
to
for
make the
should
right
be
choice,
just on
because you
the
can
other
always
side of
go
the
back
door.
and load again.
Monica
like I
combs the hand through her
typically
hair,
save scum in
parting
these
it to
games,
reveal
but
the black
that's just
plastic
me.
sheath of her jet data jack.
You also need to
A
have the
quick
patience
jaunt
to
into
read
the
all
matrix
the
of the
dialogue,
digital
even if
hand
you're not
waving,
reading
and
out
I'll have
loud,
this thing
because
right
a
off.
lot of
Be
this
right
stuff
back.
has details about the
Burst of
universe,
static crackles
about
to
the
the tiny
people you're
speaker on
interacting
Monica's
with,
com.
about their feelings
Still in
towards you.
position outside the estate.
And
Hold on,
but
Monica. Who's in charge
at the
while
end of
we're
the day, if
ejected?
you're looking for something turn-based,
Monica rolled her
it's
eyes.
very
Dietrich
similar to
fixes
XCOM
his
in
stare
a way.
intently on the vault door.
Difficult,
Glory
but
looks
similar.
cold and distant,
With lots of
just
dialogue.
as
It does have that sort of
she always does.
thing Adam and I talked about in a previous
Glory.
episode, where you could be standing in front of someone.
We've been through this
and,
before, Ika. You're not in the
throwing
KSK
out at them,
and the
and
chain of
realistically,
command
if you're in front of
nonsense
someone,
doesn't
you should be
fly
able to
in
hit
the
them 100% of the time. But
We don't need rules and regulations to guide
irritating.
us. The same principles
So
that
Adam,
apply
what do you think of
to the
Shadowrun?
Flux estate.
So gameplay wise, this is kind of
Spare
a
me the lecture. The
SRPG,
politics have nothing to do with this.
or is this more like a Diablo
Best get
style
used to it.
thing?
I
Or?
don't know.
It's very XCOM-like, turn-based strategy.
here's our
So you
first
go,
choice.
enemies go, you go, enemies go. You have a abilities, you have medikits.
I'm wondering if we should change the
you
resolution.
have
'cause
guns, and you
it's
have like
kinda
magical.
small.
Like I
Let's see.
shot somebody, and
we
then I
can
threw a
change
bolt of
the
lightning at the same
resolution.
time.
That sounds complicated.
Free perspective, high risk
I was
scale
worried
mode.
about the complexity of it.
Ooh, better.
The
Ooh,
stats,
much
I would
better.
say, are complex
Okay.
because it's like strength, dexterity, stamina, all the
That
stuff
looks
that
much
like,
better. Okay.
some
okay.
casual gamers.
Hope you
don't
guys
like.
appreciate that.
But
Oh,
that's stuff you don't need
somebody
to
is
focus on
watching.
too
Hello,
much. The combat
wherever
is
you
very
are.
much XCOM like. So if you
I guess
do
that could be
XCOM
me.
combat, you can play.
All right, so
Okay.
yes, it's
One question. I'm actually looking at your
Ika's
notes
right,
here.
Monica, we should just take a
On
second
one note,
here
you say
just in
combat is
case.
quite difficult, and
I
you almost
agree.
didn't pass the tutorial. But then
Someone
later
needs to
on, you
take
say
charge,
it's
it will
definitely for
happen.
someone who's looking for low
We
stress.
don't
So I
have time for
mean,
this
wouldn't
later. We have a
difficult
job to do.
combat
Decking
typically lead
2.
to
Why
a
don't I
stressful
take a
game,
crack at the
or
rules?
how
Let
does
me show
that
you what I
really?
can do.
How do you
Alright,
see the
so
balance there?
obviously, I
I
can't
mean,
do
in
that.
me, in the sense like if you're playing an FPS, you're playing
So,
an ARPG, right?
I mean, I'm the kind of
you
person who
couldn't
likes
save at a certain point,
order.
and you go into
So
different combat
let's go with
situations,
this.
you're likely to feel frustrated.
All right, Monica
this, you
stares
can
at you for a
literally,
moment,
just
clearly
like an XCOM,
irritated. Then a
did
little
it all
twinkle
the
appears in
time.
her
I
eye again. She
saved
smiles at you
after
as she
every
speaks
turn,
into her compliment.
and every time the
Very well, we'll
outcome
do this
didn't
one,
work, I'm
Ika.
like,
sir.
okay,
Well, I'm
reload.
Jackton
No,
Crian
this
is
guy
in
can't
charge.
die. I
Oh
love
yeah,
him
I'm in
too
charge.
much.
There's a pause. Then
Okay, yeah, I did the same thing for
Crian. Did I
Valkyria
hear you
Chronicles
right?
4.
You're putting the rookie in command.
Got to A rank
I'm
everything.
the rookie Iker, and you
All right.
don't.
Well, yeah, it sounds really interesting. Unfortunately,
You
it's
heard what
kind
I
of hard
said,
to see the
Iker.
graphics
This
here.
is
You would say the graphics
ridiculous.
hold up pretty well
Know
for a
that
game
this
from
is a joke to you, Monica,
2014?
but I'm
Or?
telling
yeah,
you.
I mean they have
Monica's
4K
tone is
textures
opus.
in the
Evidently,
game,
she is
so
heard
the maps
now.
themselves
Decisions
look
made. You
great,
have your answer.
and when you
Without
play
another
the
word,
game,
Ika's
the
image
characters
flickers and fades from
look
Monica's
nice in
communicator.
sort of the isometric view.
Sorry about
but,
that. Ika
when
can
you
be
look at the character
inflexible.
sheet,
The
the
legacy of a
actual
long military
close-up
career, but
character
she knows
models,
what she's doing, and she means well.
almost about halfway through the stream.
It's a
in my video, you
legitimate
can actually
concern. She
see
hardly
that,
knows me.
uh,
There's a
the
thin
character
line
models
between
don't look
concern and
that
insubordination.
great
You let me know if she crosses.
Okay.
Okay, now
I
chill,
guess it's
let's
similar
get this
to
done.
Divinity in that
See you on
sense,
the
where
other side.
you're
She
not supposed
punches
to be looking at them
projects
real
the
close up.
consciousness into cyberspace. Her fingers
All
harmonizing
right.
in the smooth
Okay,
rhythm
well,
with
I'm a
the
huge fan of
staccato
SRPG, so I might have to
flowing
check that
expert.
one out, actually.
I'm sure
Do you know
you'll
if
find
it's
it
available? Is
presented.
it a PC only, or?
That part I am not sure. Let me switch this to you, and I will have a look. So I put your first news up on the screen.
Oh, okay, so I'm going to start with the news then. All right,
I'll fill you in.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to be talking about two things in the news. The second one's going to kind of lead into our what do you call it, topic for the day. But the first one's going to be happy and everything's going to be wonderful. So some people have done some mining on the new PS5. They've been doing it. Excuse me. People have had hands-on with the PS5, in fact. So we've had a physical look of what it looks like when somebody's using it, what the load times look like. It's been looking pretty good. But the data mining, people have found a lot of interesting features that will be allowed in the new PS5. So one of them is going to be wish lists. And this is really great because if you have the PlayStation app on your phone, you can have wish lists there, and I have it. But if you go into the PlayStation Store through the PS4, or if you did it through the PS3 back in the day, you couldn't have a wish list. You just had to like manually think, okay, these are the games I want, and then look them up in the store. So they're going to be finally adding wish lists to the PS Store on the PS5, which is a really great thing. I don't know if you can see other people's wish lists or not. That I don't know, but you will at least be able to keep track of games that you're interested in. So that's going to be a really huge deal. Another thing that they added is that they're going to be allowing parties up to 100 people. I think the current limit is either 8 or 16. I'm not quite sure. But they're going to have parties up to 100 people. Now, currently, there are no games that support 100 players. As Crian was pointing out, Fall Guys can support up to 80. But currently, there are no games that are going to have 100. And almost certainly not a game where you're going to be playing with 100 different friends. So why would we need a party size of 100 people? Well, I'm going to be speculating here, but my guess is that these are not just regular parties, because in the PS4, if I want to make a party, I have to create a party, and then I have to invite my friends, and then, I'm the party leader, and then if I leave, it'll go to somebody else, and if everybody leaves, then the party's just done, and the next time we have to start a new one. Well, with these 100 people parties, apparently they're adding a feature that you can both name your parties and you can attach an image to it. So what I'm thinking is these are going to be persistent parties, kind of like what you might see on a Discord server where people can kind of pop in and out over time. So I think that this is probably just kind of a way to do kind of a clan chat if you're playing an online game or something like that. So I'm thinking they're moving more into this persistent parties versus these one-off parties. Now they'll probably still have that feature, I would assume. But yeah, so this is kind of interesting that they're going to be allowing this feature. The other really, really big news, and this is going to be insignificant if you live in the States, but they are going to make universally X button is select, circle is cancel. So if you live in the States, you're used to that. X is select, circle is cancel. If you live here in Asia, circle is select, X is cancel. And the reason for that is originally when the PlayStation came out in Japan, they were thinking, oh, circle is like yes, affirmative, X is no. So the circle would be select and the X would be cancel. Now, when they ported games over to the US, for some reason that swapped. So X was select and circle was cancel. I don't know why that happened, but that is what happened. And for a long time, it wasn't a huge deal. But now with the international community and a lot of games, and back then we had region locked. So if you bought a game from, say, Australia, but you live in America, you can't play that game in America unless you have your PlayStation modded. Well, now these cross international borders play is kind of a standard thing. I myself have an American PSN account and a Taiwanese PSN account. So being able to play my American games on my Taiwanese account is really, really useful because sometimes, like, for example, Persona 5, they have it here, but they only have the Chinese version, not the English version. So I have to buy that on my American account. So being able to play across obviously is really good, but then of course you run into problems like, oh, all my games circle is select except this one game. This one circle is cancel. And that can be kind of confusing. So they're going to make this a universal standard. X is select, circle is cancel. So it is kind of a big deal. They're also changing the share button on the PS4. You have a share button on the DualShock 4. Now on the DualSense 5, they are replacing the share button with a create button. And what that's going to be doing is now it's going to allow you to create gameplay clips. They're also going to allow you to do screenshots, so you can obviously create content. It's also going to allow you to share your music albums or playlists. So if you have music, you can share that as well, or voice notes. So you can just kind of hit the create button, create a voice note for yourself, and then send that on. It's also going to allow you to send updates. So if you have these big parties, I mean, currently on PS4 they have something called communities, but when you have these big parties, you're going to be allowed to share updates. So you can send updates or announcements to your party. So if you want to tell all your friends, hey, we're doing a big game night for Fall Guys on Friday, you can put that up there, and then when other people sign in, they can see your announcements. And they are also adding something called a boost mode to the PS4 games that are on PS5. So when you buy a game, it should now have something that on it that says boost mode enabled. And what that means is if you play it on the PS5, it's going to load faster. It's going to have upgrades for possibly textures, that sort of thing. Kind of like what you see on a regular game that you can put on the PS Pro and it runs a little bit better. Well, now certain games, you play them on the PS4, if you play them on the PS5, they're going to run a little bit better. And they also have a mysterious feature called Takedown, but we're not quite sure what that is yet. We've just seen the name of it, and nobody quite knows what it is. It'll be interesting to see what this Takedown feature is in the future. But yeah, so that's kind of an interesting thing. So before I go into my second news thing, because that does lead into our topic, Crian, would you like to jump in, or?
Oh yeah, of course. What do you speculate is the takedown feature about?
I honestly have no idea. It could be anything from maybe removing content online. I mean, because currently, if you have a Twitch stream or something like that, you can delete it, but I would have to log into Twitch to do that. So it could be something like, oh, okay, if I accidentally clicked the wrong button and shared a video I didn't really want to, because I'm sure most of us have done that. If you've done these recording things where you hit the button, you record something, and you meant to delete it, and you accidentally upload it, and you're like, that's like 5 seconds of nothing. It's the same thing where if you pull out your phone and you're going to take a picture, and then you realize that you took a picture of your feet by accident. You just have to delete that photo. So it could be that, but it could also be something about maybe taking down notes off of somebody else's play. I really don't know.
Okay.
To me, it sounds aggressive. So I was like, oh, does this take down like, I use this feature and I can like take you down. I don't know. It's really because a lot of these times these things too they use code names. So it could just be a code name for something. It's really completely up in the air. So yeah, I don't really know.
Not quite connected to this, but I did have a side question. I know you talked about this before in another episode. You know, you couldn't pre-order your PS5. Do you have an update for our listeners on that?
So they will be releasing a second batch of pre-orders on PS5. So you will possibly be able to pre-order them. Now, they do say that they expect to sell 7 million PS5s by April. So, I mean, that's long after launch, but we will be getting quite a few. But the only other thing is, so we talked about how Amazon was coming out and saying that their pre-orders were maybe not none of them. Some of them would not be arriving on time. Apparently, other distributors have come out and said the same thing. So apparently, what happened was in the retail industry, there's kind of a lot of times there's kind of this policy of accept every pre-order, sort it out later. And it seems like we have that problem now where a lot of these distributors have actually issued more pre-orders than they are allocated units. And so there are a lot of distributors now coming out and saying you might not get your PS5 on time.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it is terrible. But there is supposedly going to be I think a second wave coming out soon of pre-orders. I don't know if we're going to have that in Taiwan or not. But I've seen rumors of that. So we'll see. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. You want to move on to your second interesting topic?
Sure. I can do my second topic now.
Okay.
So my second topic. I keep stumbling over my words today. I don't know what's going on. My second topic is: have you heard of Hololive? So you've heard of Hololive, correct?
I have never, literally, when I read the show notes for today, I was like, oh, Hololive.
So yeah, okay. So Hololive is this new thing where basically if you have a streamer like on YouTube or something like that. So for instance, we're streaming right now. You're looking at my actual face. Have you heard of something called Animojis on the iPhone?
I've heard of them. I don't exactly know what they are. I can sort of guess what they are.
Okay, so an Animoji is basically you do something into your camera and they use mocap to basically have the little animated emoji mimic your facial actions. And Hololive basically does this for streaming where you're on your webcam, it's looking at, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, using all this facial recognition technology. Kind of like right now, we're using, there's an AI in the system that is editing out our backgrounds and putting in a new background. And if I move left or right, the background, it fills in everything that's not me. So it's kind of the same thing, except it's focusing only on me and not on the background. So basically, I'm puppeteering an animated virtual character. So I could be, anything. And when I talk, it talks. And if I look this way, it looks that way. So basically, it's you streaming as a virtual character. And this is becoming very, very popular right now. Among people who are shy and maybe they don't really want to show their actual face. I've heard of a lot of female streamers are using it just because normally there is that kind of stereotype of female streamers having to do all their makeup and wear certain things. So now they can just kind of sit down and they don't have to worry about how they look because their physical look is not on screen. There's this virtual character representing them. So it makes them feel a lot more comfortable. So that's basically what Hololive is it's this software that allows you to stream as a virtual character, basically. So anyway, Hololive was created in Japan by a company called Cover. And basically right now it's growing in Japan. It's kind of gaining popularity in the West as well. And we've seen some YouTubers using it in America. And in Asia in general, it's becoming very, very popular. So there were two streamers in Japan, Kiryu Koko and Akai Hayato. I'm sorry, my Japanese romanization reading is not that great. Um, but anyway, these two streamers were streaming and they've been getting a lot of donations. So they wanted to show kind of their audience, hey, this is where our donations come from. So they showed a graphic that basically showed all the different countries that were contributing to their streams, that were what's the word? I can't think of it now. Not subscribing, but donating. They were looking at all the people that were donating, and one of the countries listed, and one of the higher countries listed, was Taiwan. So Taiwan was doing quite a bit of donations. So this is something that's popular locally here. Now, people in China saw this and said, hey, Taiwan is not a country. It should not be included in your demographics. And so they took offense to the fact that they had listed Taiwan as a country when they were listing where their donations were coming from. So Hololive ended up banning these two accounts. I don't remember exactly for how long, but they ended up banning these two accounts for it. And when they went and released their statement in Japan and in English and all that, they basically said that the reason that these two people were banned was because they were releasing internal analytics. So they were showing where these things were coming from. They were saying this is kind of an industry secret or whatever. So they shouldn't have been revealing that information. However, in their Chinese apology, they came out and said, we have banned them because we adhere to the one China policy. And so therefore, it was offensive to the Chinese people. And so therefore, because of this one China policy, we do not acknowledge Taiwan as a country. So basically, they were giving two different statements, one stating, oh, it's for technical reasons, and one saying because we don't believe Taiwan's a country. And this kind of two-faced apology really hurt them because a lot of people in Japan got really mad about it. And a lot of people in Taiwan and other countries were really mad about it. Okay, so here I have what they officially wrote. They wrote on the English, they said they were confidential YouTube channel analytics information and making statements insensitive to certain nationalities. So they said that what they said was insensitive by saying Taiwan was a country. However, in the Chinese version, they said we're adhering to the one China principle. So obviously this caused a lot of ruckus. And this is actually kind of interesting because only 0.2% of their current income comes from China. So they actually are getting more money from Taiwan than they are currently from China. But they were still adhering to this policy. So clearly they were trying to expand the market in China by doing this. Now, since then, they've come out and they've apologized for the confusion. And what they've said is in the future, they're going to try to follow the laws, social norms, common wisdom, and the stance of its current government for universal. So it is universally equitable. So basically what they're saying is in the future, what we're trying to do is we're going to make statements that are appropriate within the certain government, and we want to adhere to the local laws. So that's basically what they're saying is like, oh, well, this is the law in China, so that's why we followed this line of thinking. But in the future, we'll think about what we're saying, and we'll say something that kind of is acceptable everywhere. So that's a bit of a scandal. And that's getting into our political topic right now. But before we go into topics as a whole, Crian, would you like to share with us some news?
Sure.
Or do you have questions?
We can take a break from this sensitive topic and talk about some geeky stuff.
We're going to come right back to it.
Oh, yeah. Definitely going to come right back to that. All right. Switching to me, and we can turn off my gameplay. My news is about the Xbox Series X and PCs. There'll be a link in the show notes for those of you who are watching live. If you're listening to the podcast, please click on the link. It is an article from Extreme Tech. Extreme Tech is a very famous website where they cover tech news, hardware, and all the stuff that I like because I like building computers. And in the picture next to him, you can see a really shiny computer with liquid cooling. That is my goal. My computer is pretty shiny, but it doesn't have, custom liquid cooling. Anyway, that's off topic. So in this article, they basically say that the Xbox Series X and the PS5 crushes the equivalent priced PC console in terms of price. So why this really made me think is because this was something I was thinking about when, if you go back all the way to our first show, I was thinking about buying a PS5 because I was kind of tired of spending money on screens, spending money on graphics cards, which are currently the most expensive parts of your computer. So I have a 4K graphics card, capable graphics card, and a 4K monitor, and together those cost more than $1,000. One of the things we talked about in another show was the 3 series graphics cards released by Nvidia. Starting with the 3070, which is 500, is 4K and better than the 2080 Ti. Um, and so that's why I've decided I'm gonna just upgrade my computer. But for new people, this made me think. It's like, okay, if I was a new person and I had a 6 or 7 year old laptop, I'm like, okay, do I buy a console or do I buy a gaming PC? And this article says for sure, you just buy a console. But the thing that made me change my mind is that if you have an existing game collection, if you're using Steam Family Sharing, we talked about that in a previous episode as well, and you have a huge collection of games. I would even say if you have more than 100 games in your Steam collection, maybe including your Epic Games free game collection, and you already have a 4K monitor, then for sure you just buy a 4K graphics card. You don't even need to think about it. If you have a 4K graphics card, then just buy a 4K monitor. But if you literally have a minimal gaming collection, I cannot recommend enough the Xbox Series X or the PS5. Adam told us all the exciting stuff about it. Unfortunately, it just is. I mean, to get the power you can get from the PS5 or the Xbox Series X at a price point in a PC is just impossible. I mean, to drive things on a 4K monitor, and this is including a 4K monitor. Now, if you're just talking about your 4K TV and playing games from your computer on your 4K TV, that is another story. On a TV, I would definitely suggest you could still build a 4K capable computer, but it would still not be 500 USD. So even that, yeah. So if you're a new gamer or you're upgrading from a poor PC or a really old console, the Xbox Series X or the PS5 is definitely the thing for you. Adam and I talked about this before, so Adam, what do you think?
So yeah, I was part of the reason that I was looking into this. I actually looked up, and part of the reason that the cost is so low is actually because with a PC you have to buy all the parts individually, but with like say the PS4, 5, and the PS and the Xbox Series X, Microsoft or Sony can just buy these parts in bulk, and so they can actually save a lot of money on that. That's part of the reason why the cost is so low. But it is kind of interesting because you're bringing up that you would need a monitor that can support 4K. But I mean, arguably, if you're doing a console, don't you kind of have to factor in the price of a TV that can do 4K?
Yes, but I mean, you can get a 4K TV. I looked this up during this week. Uh, of course, not a massive TV, like a 48-inch or 55 or 65. But you can get a 37-inch 4K TV in Taiwan for $250.
US.
Yes, yeah, US dollars.
Oh, it was like $250. Oh my gosh, that's like a lunch.
250 US.
Okay. Wow, that's cheap.
It is. I mean, now it's not a great 4K TV, but it is cheap. I mean, the cost of TVs are cheap, but 4K monitors, on the other hand, have that extremely low latency between your controller and what you do. That's why people always say if you want to use a TV as your monitor for your computer, there is some sort of input lag because of the way 4K TVs are constructed.
Well, there's also the issue of frame rate, right? Most 4K TVs are not going to have the refresh rate of a monitor, correct?
Totally true, but even now, I mean, my 4K monitor using DisplayPort 2, I get maximum 60 frames a second. Now, if you want to go to they've just recently released 120 megahertz 4K monitors and 240. You know, and if you want to get those kinds of monitors, you're paying big money. Not to mention having a graphics card that can drive more than 100 frames per second for a
Okay.
big 4K TV.
Do you know what a refresh rate on a typical TV is? Because I don't.
A typical TV, my Samsung, I bought this almost 2 years ago, 55 inches, a pretty decent model. I paid about 600 US. That does 4K at 30 frames per second.
Okay. Because I know the like for instance ours does that AI thing where it does the tweening frames to boost the frame rate
Oh, okay.
of
I
certain.
remember you
Well,
do
but
have
that's
a
for like
really good
TV
TV.
shows because certain TV shows like movies, I think they do what like 20 24 frames per second or something like that. So it just fills in the tweening. I don't remember. But also for PC, I mean, don't you kind of have to factor in versatility? I mean, if for instance, if I'm buying a PS5, I can really only play games on it. If you're buying a PC, I mean, you're not just playing games. You're also using this for email and other things. I mean, doesn't that kind of factor into the cost as well?
It definitely does, and I agree with you there. I mean, I was looking at strictly from a gaming perspective, somebody who is gamers like us. But then again, being middle-aged, it's unlikely you have a lot of time to play games. So maybe in that case, that sort of pushes the case for the PlayStation or the Xbox Series X because you don't play a lot of games. You play maybe even like me, play a max hour a day, and maybe even you, when you're busy, you don't have any time to play.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm just saying because, like as you said, we're middle-aged people, right? And then especially now with a lot of this kind of work at home, with coronavirus and that sort of thing. I mean, if I buy a PlayStation, I still need a PC at home, right? So would you say the cost of a cheap in or relatively cheaper end PC for kind of like email and work from home and that sort of thing, plus the cost of the PS4, so I have something for gaming and something for work, would that still be below, say, a good gaming PC, which I could use for both gaming and work?
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you're buying a PlayStation 4 and let's take a price point of $400 for a computer. I mean, but $400 for a computer, you'd be getting a relatively like low end, not even medium range computer, mid range computer. You'd be getting a
But I
low.
could still do email and that sort of thing, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. You'd be able to work from it. You'd be able to do some basic PC gaming. And how much is a PS4 now? Out of
It's 15,000, and oh well, it's 49.99 for the PS5. In Taiwan, it's 15,000.
So if you got a PS5 and a low-end PC, you'd be capping out about let's say I mean
800 or
900.
so.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
800, 900. So I mean that could be doable, and definitely that would be much cheaper than sort of mid to high range gaming PC.
Okay, yeah, because the graphics card for the 380 is 799.
799 plus you'd pay 79 seven at least 799 for a monitor, not
Right,
including
that's
your
just
motherboard.
the card is 799.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, so,
Okay.
like even my computer, I've spent at least $2,000 on, uh, and that is mid to high range. If you're talking extremely high range, you're talking 4, 5,000 US at least.
Now you also have to factor in though things like PlayStation Plus, or traditionally they have Xbox Gold, right? I mean, like for instance, PlayStation Plus, I'm paying. I don't remember how much. I said it last time. What was it $45 a year, $50, $60 a year? I don't remember.
My memory
I,
is as equally as
yeah,
bad as yours.
but I mean, I'm paying like $60 a year for that. So I mean, over the course of the 6 year cycle or whatever, that's like $360 added on to my initial investment. Whereas PC gaming is mostly free online, correct?
Totally, totally, totally. PC gaming wise, uh, did you pay anything? I'm thinking Steam, Epic Store. No, no, no. You don't pay anything at all.
Okay. Now, admittedly though, that might change because like as we see, Xbox Game Pass is coming
True.
to PC, and I think they're getting rid of Xbox Live Gold just doing Game Pass. So I mean, that's going to be if you're PC or Xbox, you're paying for the same thing. And obviously now with streaming like Stadia or Amazon Luna, obviously those features are all going to be paid for. So Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how price works in the future. It's definitely changing from the traditional model of that we have. So
Okay.
yeah.
I love talking about this stuff. I never get to talk about it in Taiwan.
Aw, it's so sad.
All right, Mr. Gray, we should move things along. We are.
Yeah, we're a little bit over. Okay, so Korean, do you want to get started, or do you want me to start with our topic for today?
Let me get. Actually, yeah, no. Why don't you get us started?
All right. Well, today's topic is politics, the political prerogative. Do politics belong in games? And I'm just going to ask you a simple question. Do you think politics belong in games?
We had this discussion last night, so yes.
I am going to 100% agree. I know a lot of people hate politics in their gaming, and they're like, "Oh, keep politics out of games." And I definitely and feel that way sometimes. But in all honesty, I really think that um, games are art, and politics are very much a part of art. I mean, art is expressing ourselves and what we think and our ideas. And if what are politics if not our ideas of what we think, how we think things should be? So I'm going to agree with you there. I definitely think that politics do have a place in games. Probably not every game. I don't think you're going to need politics in a game like Fall Guys. There's definitely, should be kind of a safety zone there. But I definitely do think they do belong. However, as with a lot of times with politics, it can lead to censorship. So I'm going to be covering the censorship aspect of politics and gaming. So first of all, what is censorship? Well, censorship is when you basically say, I am not going to allow this in the game, or I am not going to uh, allow people to do certain things or see certain things in games. And a lot of times when we think of censorship, the first thing we possibly think of is free speech. And typically in games, you're not going to see a lot of free speech censorship. You might see some self censorship of certain producers. Maybe they don't want they don't want to alienate certain audiences, so they self censor. However, we are seeing a lot more censorship recently, particularly due to influence from China. I mean, obviously, we saw the Blitzchung incident with Hearthstone, where he came out and said Hong Kong, was it revolution of our times and all that, and ended up getting a ban and ended up losing his prize money. Now, after that, I actually ended my WoW account, and I sent an email to Blizzard saying that the reason I was doing it is because I did not agree with their policy, or their decision, rather. I did not agree with their decision, and so I would be banning myself from the game as long as he was banned in an act of solidarity. Now, I went through the rules after they did this, and actually they had a list of rules, and it says like, oh, for this violation, this is the punishment. For this violation, this is the punishment. And at the very bottom, there was basically one last rule, and it said if the person acts in a way that Blizzard feels reflects badly on them, they can ban a player and take away their prize money. Now, this was the only one where both taking away the prize money and a ban was an option. Most of them were shorter bans, but they keep the prize money or a reduction to prize money. This is the only one that had a ban and reduction of prize money. So the fact that they went straight to the strictest punishment for me just told me like, yeah, this is corrupt. And so that's why I had to do it. Now, in all honesty, if he had done that and they had given him a ban but let him keep the money, or if they had ultimately what I would have preferred is they gave him a warning and said, hey, we don't want politics on this platform. We want to keep it focused on the game. Here's a warning. Don't do it again. If you do it again, we'll ban you. I might have been on Blizzard's side there. But the fact that they just went straight for the most extreme thing, similar to this Hololive thing, where they just straight up ban somebody for it, to me, that's just extreme oppression. So, yeah, I was definitely against that. We also see it in games like Devotion, which is a Red Candle game, a game made by a Taiwanese company. And in Devotion, the game got great reviews. Even in China, people love this game. And then one days somebody walked over to a wall and there's kind of a banner or a poster on the wall, and if you read the poster, it said something along the lines of Winnie the Pooh idiot or something like that. And I mean, this is just a background image. This is not an important thing. You know, if you're the kind of person who likes to go through Assassin's Creed and look at all the individual cobblestones on the street, this is that kind of thing where somebody noticed it and they posted it up, and then suddenly the game got review bombed to the point where Steam even took it down. Or I don't think Steam took it down. I think Red Candle themselves took it down and said they were going to change the image because it was a placement image, and they just forgot to replace it with something else later. So something like that, or for instance, in Animal Crossing, where people can kind of create their own customized stuff, and people were posting free Hong Kong and that sort of thing. So the entire game of Animal Crossing got delisted in China. You can still buy secondhand copies on the gray market, but you can't officially buy Animal Crossing in China anymore. So these are examples of free speech, and we're typically seeing them in China. I'm sure you would see them in other countries as well, but I think China is probably the biggest country that has a large gamer player base, whereas a lot of these maybe smaller countries are typically poorer countries, that are run by dictators and whatnot. So free speech is definitely an issue that we see. Another thing that we see in terms of censorship is symbolism. So Crian and I were actually talking a little bit about this yesterday and on an unrelated thing, but in the game Wolfenstein, the new Wolfenstein, in Wolfenstein, you play as a character who's fighting Nazis in an alternate universe. And in every version of the game, you're fighting Nazis. Well, in the German version of the game, you're not fighting Nazis. You're fighting this group that has a red flag with this weird triangle symbol on it. And their leader looks remarkably like Adolf Hitler without the mustache. So they basically just edited the hairstyle on the guy, and they're like, oh, no mustache. You clearly can't recognize him. That's their leader, though. Now, and I get it, because Germany, obviously, their history is a very sensitive topic. And they've had rules where they've banned, any kind of memorabilia or any of that kind. So I kind of get it there. But at the same time, that brings up the question of, those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it, right? So it's one of those things where we should we acknowledge our past, or should we just, there is a past, but we don't want to see it, so that's another form of censorship. And the last form of censorship is probably the most controversial, and that is just kind of local sensitivities and things that make people uncomfortable. So for example, games like Dead or Alive or Senran Kagura, these games that are notorious for what people like to call jiggle physics. A lot of people don't feel that that's appropriate, and so they want to censor these games. You should desexualize women. Now, on the other hand, though, there's always the argument that it's not just sexualizing women. I mean, if you look at the guys in these games, I mean, come on, 8-pack abs, for crying out loud. I mean, these guys are jacked. So, I mean, in a way, it kind of sexualizes everybody. But also in the case of Senran Kagura and another game, Omega Labyrinth Zero, the girls in those games are typically very, very young. So in Japan, in Senran Kagura, the characters are, if you look at the characters' ages, it says, 14, 15, 16. If you look at the American version, it says, 18, 20, 22. So basically the game is exactly the same. They just changed the ages of the characters. So you have this 22-year-old who's still in high school, but it's because obviously in America they have very different views on what is appropriate for that sort of thing. And then, of course, also things like violence. For instance, the game Manhunt was banned in Australia. Australia is pretty notorious for their censorship rules. So violent games will not be released there. And then also, actually, Fallout 3 was initially banned in Australia as well because of its drug use, which is kind of interesting because in Fallout, you can use the drugs. It'll give you a temporary boost, like maybe your VATS recharges faster or something like that. But your character actually can become addicted to it, at which point each time you use it, the effect lasts for a shorter amount of time. But also, if you don't use it, then your character gets debuffs. So there's a level of addiction there as well. unfortunately, I mean, but then again, you can just go to a doctor and say, hey, cure me, and you're cured. So it does kind of not do that. So really the question is censorship in other forms of art. For instance, books. Would we censor those sort of things? Would we say you can't have this in there or you can't have that in there? Would we censor those things? And so in games, should we censor those? Should we say, hey, you can't have this? I'm falling off the camera here. Should we say, so in games, should we say what people can and cannot see? Or should it be like other forms of art where it's just say, hey, this form of art is not for me. I don't want to see it, but we should leave it and allow other people to see it. So that was probably a longer description than I really needed. But Crian, you want to discuss censorship a little bit, or?
Sure, sure, sure. I mean, we talked a bit about this yesterday. Um, I know you are against censorship,
100%.
and I think, as bad as this is to say, I think certain things need to be censored. Um,
I went too far the other way.
no, no, I repositioned your
Oh,
video.
okay.
So you should be you're looking at an old image. So right now you're dead fine. You don't need to move.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, I think certain things should be censored. I made the argument to Adam last night after work that certain things need to be forgotten in order for us to move forward. Adam literally just said the opposite thing. A few minutes ago he said, we have to remember the past, in order to really understand where we came from. I
Two perspectives.
Yes, yes.
Doesn't mean one's right and one's wrong.
Exactly, exactly. Yes, and your video has decided to become weird again.
That's okay. We can move forward.
Yep. So sorry while we wait. I just have to resize Adam.
Multitasking is so hard. I'm so bad at it.
It is. Okay.
I'd say it's our male brains, but that would be sexist.
All right. So to sum it up for everyone, what is your summary for your thoughts about politics in gaming?
Me?
Yes.
Well, from a censorship perspective, I am 100% against it. Now, I do understand the need for certain things. Like, okay, so for instance, in a game like Fall Guys, you do have younger audiences playing it. So I would say there are things that you should not include. For instance, you wouldn't want anything that involves, say, nudity or things like that. Now, and this is a cultural thing too. You go over to, like, say, France, or you go to Europe, and they have a very different policy on nudity than, say, America does. For instance, Australia, I think, is a little more lenient towards nudity, but very against violence. America's the complete opposite. Nudity, bad. Violence, awesome, right? So I think there is definitely a cultural element there. But I am of the view that any art should be available to those who wish to seek it. And so, so I'll give you an example. So, for instance, the Dead or Alive games, like I said, are known for their jiggle physics, right? Okay. Bouncing ladies. Now, there are definitely a lot of groups out there who are trying to say, hey, you shouldn't make this game. It's sexist. It's bad. It's not appropriate. From my perspective, I would say don't edit that out, because there's people who want that. But I would say we need. So here's my view. I think the industry shouldn't censor itself. I think it should expand itself to include more audiences, because it is very male dominated and that sort of thing right now. And a lot of times, I think when we get into politics, a lot of times people are saying we need to take this away. And I'm against the let's take this away from this group thing. I'm very much let's give this to that group thing. So I would definitely say, like, for example, have you heard of a game, Hayato Boyfriend?
No.
Okay. So typically when we think of dating simulators, you're thinking of these games that were really popular in Japan among these kind of nerdy guys, where you can date all these different girls and try to pick the best waifu or whatever. And traditionally, this was very male dominated. We're now actually seeing a lot of dating simulators that are catered to women, that are designed for women, that you can date a bunch of different boys in it. They have ones that are catering to lesbians, where you're a woman trying to date other women. Hayato Boyfriend is all the boys are represented by different birds. So you're trying to date like a pigeon or
Oh, I do
a
know
hawk or
that.
something like that. Yeah, so it's just this quirky little thing. So that's kind of my view on it, is don't take away games from people. Still, you can still have those traditional kind of dating simulators, and if you don't like that, you don't have to buy that. But I do think the industry should expand and include games for people that don't like that, and they want this instead. So I'm kind of more of a expand your horizons person, not limit your horizons person. I think is the way I would word it.
That's perfect. That is a good way, and I have to say I totally agree with you on this point. I think games definitely have to become more inclusive, regardless of whatever your flavor is, what you like, what you don't like. Games should give you the opportunity to play the games the way you like them to.
So you want to go on your topic?
Sure, I'm gonna shorten my topic a little bit today
Yeah, I
because we
went a little
are
over. Sorry.
no worries. We are a fair bit over. I think this will definitely be the longest episode we've ever done.
Record.
All right, so let me remove my news and input in my topic. So, um, as far as today's topic goes, we were going to talk about politics, right? And politics and gaming. I viewed this topic in the sense of ideologies or political ideologies in games. So, if you're a younger listener or someone who's not familiar with politics, generally speaking, in the world, there are two kinds of ideologies, generally speaking, liberal and conservative, and there are lots of variations in between. Um, in games I have played, I'm a liberal person myself, so don't hate me. Um, I generally play liberal-leaning games, but I still find, I've been playing games since I was 6 years old. I'm turning 38 this year, so in the last 30 years of games, games sort of are leaning more and more liberal, which goes literally back to what Adam just said, is he wants games to include more things. But at the same time, I would agree with Adam that like certain political philosophies or ideologies, liberals tend to promote, same-sex marriage and LGBTQ things and some stuff. I mean, even in Taiwan is very open, very democratic, but there are still loads of people where we live that are just, I wouldn't say closed-minded, but they're uncomfortable with someone being gay or someone being lesbian. Um, they're uncomfortable with that lifestyle and talking about it, and especially in doing that in a game. Now, if you look at the picture next to me over here, uh, Gone Home was a fantastic game. It is the first story game I've ever played in my life, where it's pure story, not a lot of mechanics or mechanisms, and it was the game that literally just made me cry in the end of the story. So, before I talk about the spoiler, please skip forward a minute if you've never played Gone Home or you intend to play it, because I will spoil the ending of this game. So in this game, you're a girl, you come back to her house, and you're exploring your house, discovering who you are and what happened. And in the end of the game, you find out that, oh, actually you're lesbian and you're in love with this other girl, and this caused a whole lot of conflict in your family. Um, and the story and the way it sort of ends in the end is just so wonderful. And I told all my friends, like, hey, play this game. Uh, but like one of my really good friends, Hans, I mention him sometimes on streams because we will play Trine 4 tonight. Um, he he's just not comfortable with this kind of game, and I'm like, for me, I feel like regardless of you know whatever you like, whatever is your sexuality, pardon my English, um, this is a game that should be played by everyone. That being said, if you're not comfortable, I understand. But I mean, let me ask you this, Adam. I mean, do you think there
Yes.
should be a different Gone Home version for each person?
Absolutely not. I mean, for me, I feel like sometimes the purpose of art is to make us uncomfortable. I mean, it is to force us to think outside of our comfort zone and acknowledge new ideas. I mean, that's a big part of art is challenging our preconceptions. And I think changing that would I mean, okay, so you said that uh, part of it is that she had conflict in her family because of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You take that out, it completely changes the whole point of the game. I mean, I myself, one of my sisters is a lesbian. So I mean, like I think these people, not 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 these people. I think everybody's story is worth hearing, and we need to relate to people. And taking that out and censoring it, I mean, I think you're really kind of hurting yourself more than anybody by doing that. Um, on a personal note, like for me, one thing uh, I know, like traditionally, there's kind of been an overrepresentation of white male protagonists. Um, and so now we're seeing like a lot more people of color and female protagonists. Aloy and Horizon Zero Dawn, or Laura Croft. Obviously she's been around for a while, but they very kind of revamped her and whatnot. But this is one thing that I completely don't agree with a lot of times, where people say like, "Oh, I need," like you see some gamers and they say, "Oh, I don't want a female protagonist. I can't relate to that." And for me, I think that's just ridiculous. Because I mean, for example, like I can watch a movie and I'm a white guy, but the protagonist might be a black man. And okay, maybe I can't relate to him as a black man, but I can relate to him as a coworker. I can relate to him as a brother. Maybe if I ever have children, I can relate to him as a father. There's so many things that I can relate to this character on, that the color of his skin is so minor that like we definitely have more in common than we have not in common. And I think something like this Gone Home thing, like you were saying, you didn't even realize that this character was lesbian until the end. You were relating to this character on a completely different level. If you get to that point and you're like, oh, she's a lesbian, I can't relate to her anymore, I think that's kind of ridiculous. So I do think that they should have games like this that kind of challenge people's perceptions and then give them that kind of twist ending at the end. It's kind of like, oh wow, I hadn't considered that or thought of it that way. So no, I would not change it at all.
Okay. Okay. All right. Would you like to add anything else, Adam?
No, I think that's about it. And like I said earlier, where I'm saying, expand horizons. I mean, obviously, for somebody who is uncomfortable with a homosexual protagonist, there are still plenty of games you can play that
Totally
don't
true.
have that. So I mean, yeah, I think games are for everyone, and I think we should really embrace variety, because I think we should still have things that make us comfortable, because obviously games are designed for relaxing, right? Uh, so yeah, there is an argument that we should have some games that are just like, this is my comfort zone, I feel great. But as a form of art, I do think games should challenge people at times as well. So
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and as Adam said, record. We have set a record for the longest episode ever. We will try to be more brief in future because that is the point of our show. We want to give you all this amazing news, gaming, topic stuff in as short a form factor as possible. Thank you for tuning in today so much. It has been an exciting show. Just to
and
remind
to be
everybody,
fair, politics is a topic that does need to be embellished a little bit longer. So other
of
topics
course,
might not have to go as long.
of course. Friday's show will be we're going to prepare at 9:30 a.m. Taipei time. We should be on time for 10 a.m. Friday Taipei time or 10 p.m. Thursday night Eastern Standard Time. So please do tune in. And Friday will be our special gaming only show. It is a holiday in Taiwan. It'll be October 9th, but the holiday in Taiwan is called 1010.
I am excited.
I am excited. I'd love to have a show where we just talk about games, games, games.
Yes.
All right, and thanks for tuning in again, and see you guys on Friday.
Catch you soon.
Okay.